So, folks, there's a man named Michael Knowles. He is not a very smart man. He's also not a particularly talented man. But he did manage to luck his way into a propaganda outlet called the Daily Wire. And Michael Knowles is... Yeah. I mean, he's a fascist. He's just openly a fascist. He wouldn't say that he's a fascist, but everything he says and supports is fascism. And he went on one of the largest podcasts in the world called Whatever. It's really big on TikTok. Basically, the main premise of the Whatever show is a couple of dude bros hire like a bunch of like hot OnlyFans models to come on their show. And then they have like their actual guest. And then their actual guest is interviewed by them while these hot girls sit around and look bored. And occasionally the hot girls are allowed to ask questions to the guest. It's very stupid, Gamergy. And he uploaded a couple clips, Michael Knowles did, to his channel, and we're gonna take a look. Because remember how the last Michael Knowles video we did before we had our break? Where people were asking, but what about the separation of church and state? Well, this video is titled "There is no separation between church and state." So let's see what's cooking here. What do you think the fascist? Why would a fascist say that? That's crazy. Here we go. You guys wanted brain rot, and I deliver.
Can we go back to the happiness feminist conversation?
Sure.
Tie it up. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that should be the ultimate good and the metric for which we base like our justice system and our just overall societal progress on is self-reported happiness?
Well, I don't know even what you mean by societal progress. I mean, justice is a habit of virtue that finds the will to give to one what he deserves, right? So it's about deserts.
Right.
And so we protect certain rights and we enforce certain laws, or at least we used to. We don't really do that as much in this country anymore. And an aspect of political justice would be human flourishing. So when we talk about happiness, I'm very interested in happiness, but I'm interested in happiness in the way that Aristotle's interested in happiness, which is eudaimonia, a way to live the best possible life. And I think that we can know something about that through our faculties of reason, which are objective, and if reason weren't objective and at least somewhat reliable, we couldn't have self-government. Now, the way that happiness is often used in our modern culture is just
hedonism.
Is hedonism, like the utilitarians, right? Just means getting pleasure and avoiding pain, or is just totally subjective, to the point where you say, "Well, don't yuck my yum." What's de gustibus non disputandum est. Maybe I like this and you don't like this. Well, sure. I mean, restaurants have menus for a reason, but there must be some limiting principle here. We must know something about what is conducive to human happiness. And if we don't, then how do we have self-government?
So I want to go back. I agree. I just don't know if self-reported happiness is more congruent with the subjective reports of happiness, or that eudaimonia that you're referring to.
Sure, it's just the best we've got.
Well, and also
I totally agree.
Something you said in the beginning about individual.
Thank you for your continued support.
So one thing, as I was driving around today, as I do, I have thoughts about what constitutes freedom. And I was thinking about the difference between positive and negative freedoms, and how really, if you dig down into kind of like the Constitution, if you dig down into like, what does it mean to guarantee like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Like, what does the pursuit of happiness mean? Like, and I think that another way to restate the pursuit of happiness is the freedom to do what we will. Which is positive freedom, right? That's what positive freedom means. The pursuit of happiness, the freedom to do what we will. These, I think, are interchangeable terms. And like, it's interesting to me that, again, Michael Knowles, someone who hates positive freedoms, by the way, I think I think like that is an alien concept to him. Bro, stop calling them fascist. Fascists are economic socialists. Oh, Speedy boy, can you maybe like open up any kind of textbook any kind of like academic history book. I specialized in history. I can tell you that the fascists are not economically socialist. Do you know what even like being economically socialist means? Can you define that for me? Because literally every single time someone like you says fascists are economically socialist, y'all don't know what the fuck you're talking about. What do you think socialism is? What do you think that is? Because I can tell you what socialism is. I can tell you what the premise of that is. And it's workers collectively owning and controlling their workplaces. That didn't happen in Nazi Germany. They destroyed the unions. They killed workers who wanted to run their own workplaces. Those were one of the first groups that they targeted. So when you say, like, oh, the Nazis were economically socialist, that doesn't mean anything. That's not true. And you don't know what you're talking about. It's both. Government controlling production isn't workers controlling their workplace. I feel like I shouldn't have to point that out. I shouldn't have to point out that the government being authoritarian and controlling your workplace is not workers controlling the workplace. What you have, if the government is taking control of workplaces and dictating production and dictating working conditions, what you have there is an authoritarian, centrally planned economic model that can be indeed fascist. But usually, in a predominantly capitalist world like the one we live in, if there is central planning, then it is going towards capitalistic ends. This is why a lot of the capitalist companies from Nazi Germany continue to exist to this day. Like, just look into the history of Volkswagen, for fuck's sake. Yeah. Nazi Germany was so economically socialist that Volkswagen is still a privately owned company. That's crazy, dog. Fucking open a book.
Like, do you prefer sociocentric countries? Do you not love America and the
What do you mean sociocentric?
Like countries where, like, you're like, oh, part of the problem with feminism is so focused on the self. Well, I think that is one of the cornerstones of like Western civilization, is instead of being
It's a very liberal view of Western civilization.
Yeah, which I think is what makes Western civilization so wonderful. Like, we are one of the only I think we are like the only one founded on individualistic rights, like principles that we
I don't think we really are founded that way. I think that's what people say we were founded on now. But, you know, you hear a phrase like liberal democracy. That's the popular way to describe our country now. That phrase appears basically nowhere in the English language until the 30s. Then it jumps a little bit in the 40s. It really doesn't take off in English literature until the 80s. America, the Founding Fathers didn't think of us as a liberal democracy. They were influenced by some Enlightenment thinkers, John Locke.
They literally designed America to be a liberal democracy. That's explicitly what they designed the country to be. Give me my God-given right to private property and my AK-47. You know that under socialism, people still have private property, right? You know people still have private property and guns under socialism, right? Both of those things still exist. My God. Anyway, have like a more substantial like response. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. Socialism is so much better than communism. Do you have any like way of articulating what the difference between those two things are? Because I don't think you do. My God. Ignorance. Let's see.
and Montesquieu say, but they were also influenced by the classical tradition. And the classical tradition is one of the common good, not in the communist sense of that. But again,
They thought the common good was best pursued by having individual rights.
Private property
instead of,
still
that's
exists
one of the
under
reasons we
socialism.
founded ourselves on a separation of church and state.
Shocker.
You have the
we
right
were
to-
not founded on a separation of church and state.
I mean, we can get into that. I think
We absolutely were. The founding fathers did not want the country to be controlled unduly by one religion, which had been the norm in European countries for going back like 2,000 years. The founding fathers were aware of the tendency for people to use things like divine right of kings in order to, solidify their authority, and one of the ways to avoid that is separating church and state. Yeah, I know, but not always, right? Okay. Speedy boy, come back with something more substantial, okay?
Sure, it's well, incidental to this point, but it appears in no founding document. There's one errant letter from Thomas Jefferson to a friend that mentions the phrase, and the Treaty of Tripoli makes some little knock on Christianity to appease the Muslim pirates who were capturing our sailors. But when the First Amendment established no church at the national level, the reason for that is not that there was a firm separation of church and state. It's because there were already established churches at the state level. In many states that persisted for decades
the
after the
only
Constitution.
reference to God in the whole thing is that you can't have a test for political office. They
No, I'm just saying-
purposely left it out. You're saying that they didn't need
No, they didn't
to
leave
found
it out.
this.
They refer to religion explicitly, and they say we won't have a church at the national level because we have churches established at the state
Wait, it
level.
says that? Where does it say that in the Constitution that we're only doing this because we have churches?
Not only doing that, but we can see it in history and in the ratification debates. That's why in a number of states for decades after the ratification, you had established churches. And this changes through 19th century jurisprudence, unfortunately, but that has nothing to do, obviously, with the founding of the country. Furthermore, you have in the national anthem, which also comes from the 19th century, the notion that this be our motto and God is our trust, which is from a forgotten verse of the Star Spangled Banner. You also have it in our money. You also have it in the benedictions and the invocations of the Continental.
Yeah, again, those are all listed vaguely for a reason. Like when they talk about "in God we trust," that's something that can apply to all religions. That's the point is to try and appeal to all religious people as opposed to the God of Christianity or the God of the Roman Catholics or the God of Muslims. Like the God of the gods of Hinduism. The point is to make a general statement that can bring disparate groups of people together. That's the entire point going on here. Yeah, it can apply to Zeus or like the Egyptian deities. Like it doesn't, it's not designed to be like, yes, the Christian God. In God We Trust wasn't even part of the founding documents. Blame McCarthyism for that one. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is added long after the fact. It's like the Civil War statues, where like the Civil War statues were added predominantly like 80 to 100 years after the Civil War. Like it wasn't done to honor like the recently departed. It was done as a gigantic FU to the civil rights movement. And what he's describing here is like a whole hodgepodge of things that are completely unrelated to the issue of church and state. There is not an official state church in America, in any state. There are more or less popular churches, certainly.
How you doing, Sam?
But like there are specifically churches, like the government is specifically forbidden from establishing one church over another. Michael Knowles knows this, but and that's why his argument is completely asinine and doomed from the start, and why he's just throwing out random bullshit to see what sticks. This game is really pretty.
Congress and the Constitutional Convention. So you also have it in the speeches of George Washington. And so, John Adams says that that the American government will be based on the Christian morality. John Jay, first Chief Justice of the United States, says the same thing. He goes even further.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a bunch of quotes I can pull out from the other side. You can
There
bring up
aren't,
Benjamin
really.
Franklin. Yeah,
There are. There's
took
one
out
from
the
Thomas
word
Jefferson.
God, took the Bible and cut out every reference to the supernatural and kept the rest for wisdom.
Thomas
Yeah,
Jefferson
Speedy Boy,
made-
I'm sure you would have
did
been
make
a
commentary on the
I'm sure you would have been a
Bible,
higher-ranking Roman.
and his views were a little
official.
odd, I grant you. But I've already granted to you that in a private letter, Thomas Jefferson advocated for a separation of church and state.
And
But-
our Constitution does, right? There's
No.
a free
Shark
yes, there's a
300,
separation of
thank you
church
for
and
the
state.
raid.
You
Where?
have
We're playing Death Stranding.
What does?
And
Where do you see?
Congress shall
reacting
make
to
no. I
brain
mean, I'm
rot.
going to pull it up. We can read it word for word.
Right.
But I mean, like it is there.
Hey, Metal
We
Kitty
didn't
Mom.
all
Let's just
Also, folks, go
Listen, I
follow
didn't go to
Shark
law school,
300.
so-
He's getting a lot of flack online from dipshits.
While she looks that up, one of the other questions I wanted to get
Congress
into.
shall make no
Give 'em
law
some love,
respecting
okay?
an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof.
Right.
So
So now, where
Congress
do you
shall
see a
make no-
separation of church and state? there?
Well, when you say Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, that is that separation.
Right. And
Man, I feel like Michael Knowles in this moment realized that, like, just because they're OnlyFans girls doesn't mean that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So where does it say there's a separation of church and state? Well, it says that Congress shall make no law concerning the establishment of a religion. And he's like, well, yeah, but it doesn't say it doesn't say there's a separation of church and state. It doesn't say those words. It's like, but yeah, but when people say those words, they're referring to this specific thing. The phrase refers to this.
so, what is the Congress?
The federal government, is that what you're saying? So you're
It's
saying
the
on
law- it's the
What
lawmaking
is
body for the federal
Congress?
government, right?
yes, but if like
Before the incorporation
if the
doctrine
state of
incorporates it into the states.
California starts to be like, actually, in all our schools, we're going to start enforcing Christian ideology in our public schools, that would be unconstitutional
No, that-
under this First Amendment.
In fact, that was the way that basically all schools operated in the country until the middle of the 20th century.
Until the
Citation
Supreme
needed.
Court said that you cannot
You can't have prayer in schools and you can't teach the Bible.
because
Right.
of the
But-
First Amendment.
See, the issue that he's running into here, this is how all schools worked until, the middle, did he say the middle of the 20th century? So yeah, the 1900s. A lot of schools prior to that were explicitly religious schools. They weren't like state schools. They weren't public education. Public education was a hard-fought thing, and it took a while for like there to be standards in their establishment. It took a while before someone was like, "Hey, what if like Jewish kids are going to this school?" My God.
Supreme Court said that you cannot
You can't have prayer in schools and you can't teach the Bible.
because
Right.
of the
But-
First Amendment.
Well, wait.
no,
The
The middle
Wait.
step was the incorporation.
Wait,
of-
I love that Michael Knowles is like, oh yeah, you can't teach the Bible though in schools, but like, guys, you can. The Bible can be taught in public schools. I don't know who needs to know this, but you can teach the Bible in a public school. You just also have to teach, the Quran. You have to teach like the Torah. You gotta teach, about other religions as well. Like, you can teach about religion in school. The issue is you can't, like, get up in front of people as a public educator and be like, in front of your students and be like, the Bible is the only true religion. That's illegal. But you can definitely teach about the Bible. I mean, it doesn't even have to be necessarily studied as literature. It can be studied, like, from a sociological perspective, From, like, the perspective of a lot of people believe this to be true, and this is why you need to know about it, because it affects how other people make their decisions, I think that's a totally valid thing, and I think everyone should have to learn about all of the major religions in the world. I think that is a beautiful thing to be exposed to and learn about. Yeah, you learn the historical context.
with the Bill of Rights to the
Okay,
states,
sure,
which
but
was-
that's been incorporated unless you
Right.
don't want that part.
Right, but you're just saying the
He
country
does
was
not.
founded on the separation of church and state. I'm saying that wasn't even brought up as a matter of jurisprudence until many,
Because
many
it didn't
decades
have the
later.
word-
And then it wasn't enforced in schools until a century after that.
Yeah, because no rights were, right? That's what the important
No, I
I
think
guess
there
I'm
were
just
rights.
confused. Do you believe the Bill of Rights is like a founding document or not?
The Bill of Rights is
Yes.
Wait, I just wanna look up something real quick. The Yeah, basically he's like, well, it wasn't until like the middle of the 1900s, 1930s and 40s that like this matter was established for schools. Well, yeah, that would be because until 1910 there wasn't like a formalized public schooling network across the entire United States. It literally took until 1910 for like small cities and towns to have their own like public schools. This isn't wild then that it took a few more years after that to like have a court case go through to the Supreme Court and establish, that schools can't be teaching, one religion as true. Yeah, people think about public school as if it's been around forever, but it's a really new concept that was fought for with blood, sweat, and tears throughout the 1800s. We had publicly funded schools in the past, of course, but they were usually like one-off or like only established in certain states. Even in like the late 1800s, like only like half of states had like a public education program, So, he's being very Weasley here with his timeline and, what he's trying to portray as like founding documents. And I think any reasonable person in any kind of civics class would consider the Bill of Rights as a pretty fundamental founding document of the United States. I mean, like, just real quick. Yeah, literally the First Amendment in 1791 to the U.S. Constitution. Like, I don't know. Like, if you can't consider the First Amendment to be like one of the foundational principles of America, I don't know what to do with you. I mean, like, if you can't consider like the words, like Thomas Jefferson came up with the phrase separation of church and state. If you can't like accept that that's like a fundamental principle at play in the founding of America, I don't know what to do with you.
List of 10 amendments to the U.S.
Yes.
Constitution.
Do you believe it is a founding document when it comes to like basically the United States as a whole?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then, to me, I don't understand why the conversation is continuing, because you believe the Bill of Rights is integral to the founding of this nation, and the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, states that no religion shall be.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I think
Congress
I think you're misunderstanding what that phrase meant to the people who wrote it and the people who lived under that government.
It just seems to me, where would the misunderstanding be? The
I
whole
think
idea is
you're
that-
misunderstanding that the Bill of Rights did not apply to the states at the time, and the lack of an establishment of a church at the national level does not imply that there cannot be an establishment of a church at the state level, which we know for a fact
insane.
there was at the time of ratification.
I guess I am a little bit confused, because I don't understand if the Bill of Rights is part of the federal basically legislator, right? It's part of the federal law.
But we have a
and we are
federal
under,
system.
yeah, but the whole point of creating the Constitution, and according to the Federalist Papers as well, is that, oh no, we need some like overarching law that, goes throughout the nation.
He's basically trying to argue here that the federal government can't establish a religion, but states can, and that's not correct at all. It's almost like he's like a wealthy fail son who never amounted to anything with his pool of talents or lack thereof, and is now just butchering law. My God. Yeah, exactly, Narodiev. The Constitution is more important than the Bible in the founding of the U.S. Definitionally. But Jack, the Constitution didn't use those exact wow words, and the Constitution is gospel. Like, no. He's literally arguing for that whether or not the states, individual states, can establish an official church of the government is a states' rights issue, and that's crazy. That is crazy.
Nation, so that way that we
and just incorrect. No one interprets the law or these amendments this way. Literally no one, because it's a stupid way to interpret them. This is like thinking that the law of gravity is actually being propelled by tiny gravity fairies who like physically grab the object and cause it to smash into something else. That's the level of like misinterpreting. Like he's like sitting in science class going like, yes, the law of gravity. The law of gravity proves that fairies are real. And you're just like, what? That's the level of moon logic we're operating on right now.
can be a united nation.
Not exactly. So federalism, right, refers to the principle of subsidiarity. There would be different levels of government. Frankly, all the way down to the individual, right, and the family and the community and the state and the national government. So certain powers and rights were reserved to the federal government, but they were relatively small at the ratification of the Constitution. And then many, many rights and laws and powers.
Yeah, it's very funny that Michael Knowles absolutely would. You're correct, Salmon Moose. Would absolutely argue that America was founded and like the populating of America by Europeans was driven by a desire for free exercise of their religious beliefs, which were considered fringe at the time. And he would make that argument and then in the same breath be like, and that's why the states should be able to establish official religions, just like the government of England. You know, like that's insane. Insane stuff. Tiny wizards that control gravity, electricity. Ah, yes, and when you have a tummy ache, it's because there's a tiny gnome growing in your stomach.
Were reserved to the states, and then some were reserved to the people.
Man, what a dipshit this guy is. Okay, let's watch the other half of this appearance on whatever. I know that there's probably a much longer thing, but I have no interest in actually watching a full episode of this show. It's brain rot, and not in a fun way, and in a way that would likely get me DMCA'd. So we're just watching the clips that Michael Knowles has shared. Go.
Feminism.
I think the most common definition is the social, political, and economic equality between the sexes. So according to that definition, I would
Based.
definitely identify as a feminist.
Okay.
Yeah, in general, I agree with that definition. I believe that we should not be discriminated unfairly on the basis of sex. If I had to add any addition to feminism.
I would agree with all that, and then I would also add on just kind of adding more cultural currency to just female spaces, women's interests, and just women's proclivities in general.
That last
Oh, they just turned it up.
good if that's what it were, but I actually think feminism does the opposite of that in practice. And frankly, going all the way back to the beginning of feminism in the 18th century, probably my definition of feminism would be Gloria Steinem's definition. She was the very famous feminist of the second wave, which is that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Feminism is the idea that men and women are not complementary, they're not different and helpful to one another, but they're identical and indiscernible. That there are some superficial differences. You ladies might be a little prettier perhaps than I am, but all in all, we're basically exactly the same. And I don't think that's true. I think it's a false view of human nature, and I think it's harmful to everybody, and especially harmful to women.
Right. I've worked with Gloria Steinem's company, Women's Media Center, for like 4 years back
My
in college.
condolences.
And obviously that's like a more crass interpretation of, I think, what she meant by that, which I think is more so, she's more so characterizing the fact that women in general, when they're taught how to self-actualize, it's typically tied to contingency on a man and getting married and starting a family, versus men, when they're told the ways to self-actualize, it doesn't necessarily require a woman. So obviously her saying a woman needs a man the way a fish needs a bicycle sounds crass and like she's being a bit misandrous, and obviously some radical interpretations may take it that way. But I think what she's trying to say is that women, you can like define yourself and your career and your potential outside of simply marriage and children.
What do you mean by the phrase self-actualize?
Just like live up to your potential, use your rational faculties, use the design of your potential in your brain.
I agree that I want to live up to my highest potential. I want women to live up to their highest potential. I want total human flourishing. But I think you've given away the game on the radical and liberal foundation of feminism, which is the notion that it comes purely from the self. It's a matter of self-liberation that I can do totally self-sufficiently, as if I were an island unto myself. But no man is an island unto himself. And so I didn't make myself. I didn't create the family.
You see what he just did there, right? You see what he just did there? That you can self-actualize, but no one is really alone in society because we live in society. And women need men, otherwise they'll be alone and they won't be able to self-actualize. You can only actualize if you are with a man. That's how God intended it, right? Like, what he's doing here is completely ignoring that women can exist together. Like, women can socially self-actualize and have a support system with other women or with men, but like they don't necessarily need the man. The man is not the key component that allows them to actualize, that allows them to realize their full potential. Like it's not a necessary component for the additional social support to be provided by a man. That's the point. That's the point of the saying. But like he can't accept that, so he has to actually like play like these weird little shell games with his language. Women gaining a sense of self-independence from a man is scary though. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Ivory Inferno. It doesn't have to be in a romantic sense. It like I'm talking like friends, family, etc. Yeah. My wife was lost until she married me. Yeah, women just are wandering around like sheep until a man discovers them and plucks them from the ocean of sheep and begins the long, arduous process of breaking them and helping them self-actualize.
Family that I was born into. I didn't create the community that I was born into, the country that I was born into. I take the opposite view of the liberal view. The liberals say that man is fundamentally an individual. The conservatives would say, no, man is a social creature. Man is a political animal. And so the irony, I think, of someone like a Gloria Steinem saying that or insinuating that we just want women to live up to their fullest potential, is that the way that she and the feminists have done it is to totally erase women. And I think this goes back way further than the second wave. You sometimes hear conservatives, the squishy kind, they say, we love the feminism, but only the second wave, not the third wave, or we like the first wave, not the second, or whatever. We're on like the 10th wave now. But it's been a problem from the beginning. Even Mary Wollstonecraft, who founds feminism with the vindication of the rights of woman, she writes that Providence has created men in such a way that they are more inclined to virtue and they're more endowed with virtue. And I think that's exactly what Gloria Steinem thinks, because the way that second wave feminism actually...
I love that he's sitting there looking women dead in the face and being like, "Yeah, I'm more inherently endowed with virtue than you three sluts." That's essentially the argument he's making here. And you need to understand that like he's doing that because his primary audience isn't women. It's not to appeal to these women. His primary audience are the men who watch a show like whatever. His primary goal is to win that audience over. And one of the ways he can do that is by stroking their collective ego. By essentially saying, yeah, all of you who are watching, all of you men who are watching right now, these bitches, they lack virtue. And men, you guys watching, you are inherently more virtuous than them. You know, that's what he's making. That's the appeal he's making to the audience. Hey, B for Brain.
Actually was practiced was it denied the virtues particular to women, and it said the only way to be virtuous and to flourish is to be a man. So if women want to be virtuous and flourish, they got to dress like men, and they got to have the same attitudes towards sex as men, and they got to work in the workplace exactly as men do, and they just have to pretend to be men. But I think that's very disrespectful to women and harmful to them, because if a woman tries to be a man, she's always going to fail. Just look at the Penn swim team now when and defeat them. This is why some feminists wisely are turning against them. I think women are great. Women have a wonderful nature, and when women are fully women.
Are they bleeping it out because he's saying like the T slur? Is that what's happening here? Because I think that's what's happening, dude. There we go.
That they can really flourish, and when they pretend to be men, they get miserable.
I think what a lot of feminists push back on or worry about is this idea that we have ascribed gender to certain things that are kind of agendered. So, for example, when it comes to the workplace, the idea that like, oh no, a woman must stay at home, going out and working is a man's job, seems to be something that a lot of people have contention with. Because
Hey,
it seems
Purple
like
Violet. Thanks for jumping
I'm not
over to
saying
the
that
River
women
website.
don't have a place at home taking care of children, but it doesn't seem like it should necessarily be limited to just that. So, for example, even like throughout history, you still have women who, despite taking care of home, also have like side jobs or side hustles or stuff like that to help contribute to the family. So I think this whole idea that's like, oh no, like women are just trying to be men. Sometimes I wonder, oh no, we are just saying that this is for a man to do, even though it seems like there's more opportunity for women to participate in those arenas as well.
I think you've just made my point, though, which is that you say throughout history,
Again, women don't have to pretend to be men to do like masculine coded activities. This is just him being openly sexist.
including long before feminism ever came onto the scene, women did plenty of things, you know, in addition to just being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, right? They were involved in their community,
As
they
he
had side
fantasizes
hustles,
about
as
it.
you put it. So they did all these things. I mean, I think of the most
No, it's
famous
not me, I believe
anti-feminist
that.
American of the 20th century. It was Phyllis Schlafly. Phyllis Schlafly had 6 kids. She was a housewife. She said the only person whose permission she needs for her political activism is her husband's, which irritated feminists to no end. She's one of the most important political figures of the whole century. She single-handedly killed the Equal Rights Amendment, traveled all over the country, one of the most vaunted figures in the American right. She was able to do a lot of things in public, but she recognized
Ooh, I
that
need those
her
ceramics.
particular role that her husband never could have, that no man on earth ever could have, even if he kids himself, is to have children, to be a woman, to be graceful, to do the things that men can't do. And so she can do things beyond that as well. But if you erase the particular advantages of women, then women are put at a disadvantage.
I mean, the problem is women were also excluded from doing a lot of things. So I don't think anyone here thinks there are no differences between men and women. But there's a lot of overlap as well. And while men and women may be different on something on average, to look at a woman like I think you and some of your other conservatives are under fire for saying, oh, if it's a female pilot, I'm automatically going to assume that this person is incompetent.
I've never said that. Though if an
you
airline
have.
tells me that they are prioritizing DEI over merit in the cockpit, I would probably book another airline.
Okay, and that's, I guess that's a little different. I get what
I'm
you're,
just
I
looking
get
at
that. But
statistics,
my
but,
point is like to say women are just.
Man, I wish people would push back a little bit more on this point. Like, look at his shit-eating grin here. I wish people would push back more on this point because, like, DEI programs don't ignore merit. The entire purpose of DEI programs is that, like, essentially, we know, and we know this because we have research on it, right? There are research papers on this, that, like, when a bunch of equally skilled applicants submit resumes, people with whiter sounding names get prioritized. That's a common problem in America. That's a common problem in American business. And so what DEI programs do is they just even the scales. And that doesn't mean that they hire like less qualified employees. They're hiring just as qualified employees. They're just making sure that they aren't, you know, falling victim to a pro-white bias that has historically affected all businesses in America. So, like, yeah, like that's the entire purpose of DEI. It's not, oh, well, you know, we hit our quota. We need more black people. Time to grab like that homeless guy from the corner. No, that's not how that works. They don't just throw an unqualified pilot into a plane. But they make this argument. Conservative talking heads make this argument because it is a way for them to be racist in a slightly more socially acceptable way. You know, it's a way for them to essentially tell Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy to fuck off. You know, Martin Luther King Jr., by the way, famously was in favor of affirmative action and DEI programs. You know, he said a society that has done something to harm the black man, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, must now do something special for the black man. And like this is why affirmative action and DEI programs exist. To address that imbalance that leads to a lack of diverse voices at the top or in the middle or at the bottom of various companies. He was also a socialist. That is true. That is one of the fundamental reasons why you know, conservatives despise Martin Luther King Jr. It's because at the end of his life, prior to his assassination, he was leading the working people's campaign. He was leading like a campaign to essentially overthrow capitalism. So, yeah. It's not surprising. But man, what a shit-eating grin. This guy looks unreal, man.
More emotional than men. That may be true on average, but to then look at a woman and just be like, automatically I'm going to assume this woman is more emotional, I think that's the lack.
So why is it true on average?
It may be true on average because we're different. I've never said we're not different,
right.
But the problem is to say we're different and then put us into categories and be like, there can be no overlap, women have to do this role and men have to do this role. That's, I think, what feminism is pushing back on.
What you're arguing for is a kind of feminism that says, actually, all the differences between men and women, it's totally true in the aggregate, you know, in these two different types. But on rare occasion, there's going to be some woman.
Not that rare. Like, let's say, okay, gender roles. Like, let's say most people, let's say 70 to 80% of people will fall into natural gender roles. But then there's still 20% of our population that may not. And do we make a society where we force that 20% into these roles, or do we allow choice? I think a lot of feminism,
yes.
The cornerstone of feminism is choice for women. You can't stay home.
I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure, because there was a famous debate between Betty Friedan, who was the prominent American feminist, and Simone de Beauvoir, one of the most famous feminists of the 20th century. It was in 1975, and Betty Friedan said what you said. She said, look, I think we should give women a choice. Maybe they want to go out into the workplace, or maybe they want to stay home and raise their kids, but they should have a choice. And Simone de Beauvoir, who was a more consistent and intelligent feminist, said there can't be a choice. And the reason there can't be a choice is that if given the choice, most women would stay at home. And if most women stay at home, women will not be free. If we want true women's liberation, women must be forced to be free. And Friedan recoiled from this because she knew it wasn't going to play well in Peoria. But Simone de Beauvoir had the right point, and I think the more consistent feminists have agreed with her.
I don't know. I mean, feminism has, like, it's gone so many different directions. So to pick the feminists that we don't agree with for this debate, I don't know if that's conducive to.
Also, I'm not necessarily sure when you're saying like, oh no, most women would stay at home. That's a choice that they would have, because when you look at like the uprisings with like feminism, or when it gained the most traction, it was post-war era. Partly because of the reason why is because during these war eras, men went out, they were drafted, they had to go fight, et cetera, et cetera. Women were expected to take up more traditional male spaces, work, and when the men came back, what ended up happening is that a lot of women did not want to leave the jobs that they had. They wanted to keep the somewhat level of financial independence that they were able to gain. And that's why we see like these huge like feminist uprisings during those periods of time. So it seems to me if you're saying that most women would stay home, that just wouldn't happen. Like women would have not had like these feminist movements go forward.
Well, the feminists didn't want to leave their jobs, but women broadly perhaps did. So anecdotally, people write in a lot and they tell me, Michael, at least while my kids are little, I'd love to stay home and raise them. Maybe I'll go back
More
to work after, but
vibes-based,
I just can't. You can't raise a
conclusions.
family in America for the average person today on one income. And that's a result of women entering the workforce and wages decrease, which is why not only the radical left, but also the more commercially minded right wing was in favor of that. It's the same reason they're in favor of mass migration, just lowers wages for people. A lot of women, however, seem to feel not that they have the choice to go to work, but that they have to. And this is expressed in a famous study that came out of UPenn and was published by Yale in 2008, which was the paradox of declining female happiness. And I love the way this study opens up. Right in the abstract it says, despite the
What a
past
demon,
35 years, I'm paraphrasing, but despite the past 35 years showing so much marked progress and improvement in the lives of women, women's happiness, according to this meta-analysis, has declined, both absolutely and relative to men.
Like what an actual demon. Like he's like, I love this study about how women are unhappy now. Like amazing. What an actual demon. Meanwhile, like literally all these women are bored as shit listening to him talk. Look at her face, man.
Men. So it's not even just that everyone got more miserable because of, I don't know, a bad economy or something. Women in particular became less happy, despite all these objective improvements to their lives. So to me, the obvious rejoinder to that is, well, maybe those objective improvements, namely feminism, that's the thing that happened between 1973 and 2008, maybe that wasn't an objective good. Maybe that was just illusory.
Well, to me, the
I
obvious
would-
rejoinder of that is that women are becoming disillusioned with the life they had prior. They're like leaving the cave,
Base.
so to speak, allegorically. And also, I don't think you should use self-reported happiness as a metric of justice or any like objective good, because you can plot self-reported happiness with pretty much any variable. Like highest reported crime, violent crime in the United States, also is directly correlated to self-reported happiness. Does that mean one causes the other? No. Does that mean we should think
What do
that
you mean by
violent
that?
crime is a
Highest
good?
violent crime is
I'm just saying in
correlated.
the periods of time when we've had the most violent crime in the United States, there's also a correlation between highest rates of self-reported happiness.
Well, not according to the survey I just cited, right? If happiness has been declining steadily, especially for women since 1973 to 2008, you had a major crime spike in the early 90s, but you didn't have a major spike in happiness. So perhaps there's some survey that you're referring to in some city somewhere,
Well, and
but,
just
but it
to-
wouldn't.
But also, even
pertain to
women
this.
living traditional lifestyles are seeing a downfall in happiness. So why is it the women who are still living the type of lifestyle that you would probably prescribe to women are also having a decrease in happiness?
Also,
I'm not convinced of that.
The Institute of Family Studies did a big, and there's a lot of data out there that actually children make you less happy. So there is this problem happening where we're like, okay, why are people less happy? But we don't know. We don't
But
know
I'm
what
not
it
so
is.
sure. Again,
and then you would expect then that if you looked at the most unhappiest countries, you would expect Canada, the Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, because they're very egalitarian, and you're not seeing that they actually have higher happiness levels.
Well,
than
they have
we
the
do
highest
here.
rates of alcoholism in the world. You think of Denmark, Norway, Iceland in particular.
But
So I don't know how
mean,
happy they are.
Now you're changing, but if we're gonna just go by what
I don't-
makes
I
people
don't think
happy,
alcoholics
I
are, like,
don't
the
know if
happiest
I think there are arguments to be
she's
made
right.
about like community and those things may make people less happy. But this idea that's because women aren't having children, when we also have data, a lot of data that shows children, especially in the United States, has the biggest happiness gap, and then
Love
we're
the
seeing
lyrics,
that
I
other
agree.
countries that are more feminist are also not having, like, if you compare like Scandinavian countries to like the East, like my parents are immigrants from Iran. Iran has really high unhappiness levels. A lot of countries
Naturally,
where,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you can say that this is causing that, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Nordic countries also have much more homogeneity, which is correlated with
I agree.
political happiness. But so they're all of those differences. But I think the
Interesting argument to just slip in there, Michael. Really should have been a little bit more pushback on that, I think. But he you all noticed that, right? How he just like slipped in like an ethno-nationalist talking point. Yeah. All of these ethnically homogenous countries are a little bit happier. As if like, yeah, the reason those countries are happier is because of the like homogeneity of them, as opposed to like their social policies that like allow people to have free time to like socialize and interact and like be happy. Also, folks, we've been going for about 3 hours now. Consider dropping some subs and donos so that I can continue to live and make content. Huh?
The point about children making you unhappy and the point about leaving the cave, I think those are both a little bit of a cope, because they're belied by the fact that if it were just that women were coming into their own now and they were recognizing the oppression of which they were not
that's too much
conscious
of an easy
previously,
layup for him. He would
then
just
why
say
would
it's
they
because
keep getting
Islamic
less and
people.
less happy? You know, at a certain point, aren't you supposed to turn the corner and become more happy in your independence? But that's not what's happened. For 35 years, it just gets worse, and worse, including relative to men. And then for children, you look over the past, 70 plus years now, 74 years, since 1950 to present day, the marriage rate has dropped by 60%, and the birth rate has dropped by 50%. So, just looking at the whole society, we are having
Michael
many,
just got
many fewer
blown
children
the
than we
F
were
out.
before.
But
And yet
the
we're
whole
much
world,
less happy.
so
even
hard.
even like
Sure,
places
whatever-
like Pakistan are having less kids.
Sure, I'm just
Yeah.
pointing out. You're saying that having fewer children makes you happier, and I'm saying we're having many fewer children, and Americans are much less happy. And you see this even beyond just
But that's
random
not.
surveys.
You can't link that.
I kind of want to push back on this idea that we've gotten more unhappy as time has progressed, because at least to my understanding, what's happened in the last 20 or 30 years is an increased awareness of like mental health and what that means. So it's not necessarily that people were really happy before and now suddenly are miserable.
Yeah.
It's just that now we're actually having data where people can talk openly about their mental health, unhappiness, and not
Yeah.
be as stigmatized as before. If we look at the 1950s and even like housewives around that time, we see like there is actually like a huge rate of like narcotic usage and basically like prescription.
That's an excellent point. Like the rampant abuse of drugs just to get through the day. Also, like keep in mind, like in the 1950s, like we weren't prioritizing mental health at all. Like people didn't have terms for like post-traumatic stress disorder. We literally, if somebody was mentally unwell, we just called them a moron and then we locked them up. Like literally. That was what we did. So yeah, it's not surprising that we now have more sophisticated ways to understand mental health and like what people need and how to like cater and like help them be productive members of society, as opposed to just throwing them a bunch of like pills so that they're walking through life high as shit. Yeah, they're doing really, really good.
To that level. So I'm not necessarily, if I would go as far to say, we've gotten unhappiness we've gotten more unhappy as time has gone by. I would say more likely, oh no, we've been able to properly report, measure, and assess mental health as time has gone by.
And
I mean,
medicate.
listen, I'm very inclined towards your view that social scientific studies are bunk. I mean, there's a major replication prices. I think it's all ridiculous. I will cite those social science stats when they serve my argument, because why not? That's what we do these days. But I agree. I'm skeptical of measuring happiness and all the rest of it. But on the mental health point, I think here we do have some pretty firm data, and it contradicts the argument you're making, which is right now, 1 in 5 middle-aged women in the country is hooked on antidepressant drugs. On any given day, they're taking them. Women are 2.5 times as likely as men to take these depression drugs. It is ubiquitous at this point. And the rates of taking depression drugs are going up. It's getting much worse. So if we're not getting less and less
Again, it's better to be on antidepressants than it is to be like hooked on like painkillers and opioids, which is what they did in the 1950s for housewives.
happy, why do people keep taking more and more depression drugs?
Well,
No,
why
but-
were housewives in the 50s downing like a bottle of wine at lunch every day? I'm just saying
Yeah,
now
were they?
we're seeing
I'm not so sure. I mean, these are
They- they
we're
anecdotes.
were.
supplanting
that-
self-medication now with actually like medically backed drugs that actually help women with their mental health issues.
I
In
don't
fact,
know that they
It's also
help.
now that when
Oh man, dude, he's getting just like beat with like plywood. My God. Just out of curiosity. Yeah, I guess it's actually been relatively constant. Like drinking. I'm actually kind of surprised to see that. Though it's worth noting that like during World War II, the amount of drinking just spiked like crazy. Is there data on like I want to know alcoholism. Rates of alcoholism, not just like I'm not that committed to the bit, but interesting to look at later, I think.
you're sad, you just go to the doctor and they give you antidepressant drugs. I don't know how much more depressed people actually are, other than the fact that they're just dishing them out to everybody.
And they're dishing them out more and more and more. Sure, you can blame the pharmaceutical industry or the medical industry. I'm just pointing out, one in order to argue against these social science statistics, one has to just turn toward unfalsifiable anecdotes and memes. The housewives were all miserable in the 50s. They were secretly, drinking behind their husbands' backs. But I don't know, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. All I have are the data available
Well, the
to
data
me,
is
and the
just
data are
saying
getting
that more
worse.
people are on antidepressants. It's not telling you what.
Yeah, all I have is data. I just have the facts, says man who we've literally watched like 3 videos of now, and like citing one fact is like the most he's done. One fact out of like 40 minutes of content where he's claiming to be citing facts. Insane, wild stuff. But this lady's absolutely correct. Like, yeah, no kidding, more people are on antidepressants now in 2024 than there were in the 1950s. People weren't on antidepressants in the 1950s. They were on, painkillers and shit. They were busy huffing gasoline.
Why? It's not telling you what caused it. It's not telling you.
Depression,
so that's,
presumably, is causing
well,
it.
that's what we're debating here: is what could have caused it. You're saying, oh, it's.
No, but I'm not
unequivocally-
saying, maybe they hate their husband, maybe they hate their kids, maybe they don't like the weather in their town.
Like, I think
but
ADHD
in any
is
case,
a great example of this. Anyone now can just be like, oh, I have trouble focusing. Does everyone have ADHD, or are people just getting these drugs? Like, these are questions that we should ask before we jump to a conclusion. That
No,
this
I
is-
agree. Look, I think that they're pathologizing a lot of ordinary aspects of human nature. But I think part of the reason that we do that is because we're so radically misinterpreting human nature, which brings us right back to feminism.
Can I just really quick, you feel free to cut this. I love watching you work.
Nah, we're good. Oh god.
Yeah, just what I needed.
No, we're not watching this. It's 2 hours long. I can't. What is wrong with modern women? I can't do another video with this guy. I can't. You can't make me. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing a 2 hour long video about this. Like, holy shit, the opening part of this video is, did Pfizer bring Travis Cleese and Taylor Swift together? Like, this guy's literally building entire conspiracy theories about drug companies pairing up Taylor Swift. I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. You can't make me. Anyway, folks, if you've been enjoying stream today, hit the follow button over on Twitch. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the like button on the YouTube stream. You little goony goofers.
Oh, that's right.
And consider dropping some subs or donos. I know it's a weekend stream, but the subs and donos are what allow me to do streams and have shelter and food and all that jazz. Hey, Spicy Diarrhea. I'm confused. Isn't this supposed to be like a red pill podcast? Why are the women blowing the fuck out of this dude? Well, so Spicy Diarrhea, what they do on podcasts like this is they either find like left-leaning like ladies who are attractive, like super attractive, or they find OnlyFans models and then they hire them to come on the show. Predominantly, I'm not super familiar with the show, but my impression is that they predominantly have like OnlyFans models on, and then mainly it's the host of the shows asking the guests questions, and then sometimes the girls on the show get to go back and forth with the guest. So basically, Michael Knowles, I think, went into this expecting like lightweight, like non-intellectual ladies from OnlyFans who are going to nod along and accept whatever bullshit came out of his mouth, and he found that that was not the case. That's essentially what happened there. He got blown the fuck out by his own arrogance. Can we find out who the girls are? I mean, yes, but you'll have to look up that show. I'm not looking that up right now. Just doll up Riverboat Jack. I don't think I look good enough to be on one of those shows. I'm aged out of the primary demographic that they want to bring on. And frankly, I was probably still too old when I started my transition. You notice they don't have like dommy mommies on, you know? Couldn't find a way to hit notifications on YouTube for your channel. I can't help you with that. I don't know how to do it either. Are two of them connected with PV? That's cool. But you're cute. I don't feel cute. Gamer G, you're starting earlier than I did. Don't worry about it, okay? It'll take a bit, but you'll get there. You'll get where you want to be. Yeah, this is why they primarily bring on like 19, 20, 21-year-olds, you know?
Just a little longer.
Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe! My shelf life as a woman in media is rapidly depleting.